ex-girlfriend. Guy doesn't know when to quit.
Welcome to the club. You get used to it.
In a generation of divisive games and movies that sacrifice quality for the sake of themes, of course, it'd be perfect to talk about the video game of 2012 that can bring both RE fans of horror and RE fans of action together. Resident Evil 6, obviously. Yeah, RE has been a bit of a punching bag for the past few years until very recently, where they finally managed to pull off the intriguing RE7 game and the amazingly awesome RE2 remake, which is basically neck and neck with DMC5 as my favorite game of 2019. It's safe to say that these two games overall managed to redeem RE in the eyes of the fans, until RE3 remake showed up and basically managed to be 2020's most disappointing zombie game, until The Last of Us 2 came out. But what if I told you that RE6 was a good RE game? Okay, maybe not a good RE horror game, but let's take a look to find out if the supposed worst RE game is as bad as everyone says it is. RE6 was perhaps the farthest away from the tense atmospheric survival horror style from the old school RE games. From explosions and martial arts styled melee moves to fighting a giant zombie fly, it's pretty clear that RE6 pretty much ups the ante on the insano scale that RE4 managed to make. But what really impresses me most of all was the fact that we get to have 4 different campaigns starring some of the most iconic RE characters in Resident Evil history. In fact, this is the first and only game in the entire series to have Leon and Chris present in the same story, and it's also the first time we actually see them meet each other face to face. Of course, there's not just returning Resident Evil characters such as Chris and Leon, but also new characters making their debut into the series, with perhaps the biggest addition being Jake Mueller, played by the actor who seems to be in everything nowadays, Troy Baker.
There's always something with women!
The best part about all 3 characters is that while they may play similar, they do have differences that set them apart from each other. Of course, we're going to be going into these characters by going into each campaign and reviewing it. So that leaves 4 campaigns to blast through, so strap yourselves in for one hell of a ride, cause RE6 is holding no punches. Leon's campaign is a lot closer to classic Resident Evil than the other campaigns, and is easily held up as the best of the campaigns, and it's hard not to see why. Out of all the campaigns, Leon seems to have the closest to a balance with action horror that the other campaigns lack. Leon's campaign kicks off with a big bang, with the titular hero having to shoot the zombie presence in the face. That on its own is a sign of just how crazy this game is gonna get. Leon's story does unfortunately start off pretty bad with the forced walking segment, but it starts to pick up a bit later once you get into the elevator. At this point, you're finally able to pull off some of the coolest additions to the game that sadly hasn't been followed up on: sliding. RE6 added a whole new host of movement abilities to the protagonist's repertoire, such as the ability to sprint at a much higher speed than before, and perhaps the biggest, most groundbreaking feature in any Resident Evil game: moving and shooting. But one new feature that seems to not be mentioned quite as much is the new sliding mechanic. By putting in a specific input, the player can pull off a dodge move, and if you're still holding the aim button, you can shoot from a prone position. This addition alone helps change up so much of RE6, since it basically gives you a whole new style to taking on enemies. By perfecting this, not only are you able to pull off sick as hell gunslinger moves that wouldn't look out of place in a 90s flick, but you get a new method of shooting up on your enemies while avoiding damage or pulling off an escape when you're getting swarmed. There's also a new ability to be able to counter certain attacks as long as one times the melee button correctly, and these counters are no doubt the best method of implementing counterattacks mid-gameplay. They all offer up distinct advantages such as doing more damage to enemies or outright one-hit killing them, which makes them essential at mastering if you want to conserve ammo for the big encounters. It also helps to mention that these counters look sick as hell to pull off. I mean, just look at this shit. And that's not even going into all the tricks that all the characters have. Leon, for example, has a special ability to dual-wield pistols in order to get a faster firing rate, and oh boys, it's satisfying. Helena Harper, Leon's partner, also has a sort of dodge style move when quick firing her default shotgun. Baby, you're making me blush. Leon's story has him start off fighting his way through tall oaks to get to a cathedral that might have some answers on who's behind this new outbreak, and through Leon's journey, we battle against so many cool monsters throughout it, such as bloodshots, donut zombies, and multi-booby zombies? Once you get into the cathedral, the game's style becomes a lot closer to RE4's environments, with the Temple of Doom styled arenas to fight through. The boss fights in this section definitely are the point where you realize that these new movement options you learned, it's time to put them to the test. With a battle against...
Watch out for yourself.
this demonetizing boss. Learning how to dodge and be more precise with aiming is key to sending her back into the soft-core hentai where she belongs. After the insanity of the catacombs, where you literally fight a fucking zombie shark, you're headed to China, and from that point on, one of the most unique parts of this game comes from when you team up with Jake Mueller and Sherry Birkins against Nemesis's not successor. Throughout the game, you'll cross paths with the other campaigns, allowing you to team up with characters from other campaigns temporarily. Sadly, Leon and Chris don't really get a co-op moment. Honestly, out of all the team-ups this game has, it's shocking that the team-up most fans have always wanted to see is only going to happen through Mercenaries mode, but we'll get to that later. The next section ramps up the horror angle, introducing the bane of many players' existence. The Rashik... Okay, fuck it. The Dementor lookalike. Being one of the more unique monsters where you can't really kill it, similar to Lisa Trevor's and... It's more of a race to get the hell out of Dodge before... that happens. Of course, nothing's stopping you from improvising when this thing's body parts try to slow you down. Once the big bad comes into play, that's when Leon's campaign pretty much does whatever it takes to top whatever insanity any previous RE boss has ever managed to display. From a deer-like zombie monster to a zombie T-Rex to literally transforming into a giant zombie fly from a cheesy 60s horror movie flick, I was just itching to see what craziness comes next. And the moment I saw that beautiful rocket launcher sitting in that helicopter, I just smiled and got to work on exterminating with the most classic way to finish off an RE game. Blowing the final boss up with the rocket launcher. I mean, what other game can be as this on the nose as this insanity? Oh yeah, that game. Jake's campaign also does suffer a bit from a slow start, but picks up very fast with the introduction of Nemesis' twice removed cousin, Ustinik. Troy Baker brings his A game when it comes to voicing Jake, giving the newbie some pretty damn good one-liners, and it's one hell of a badass style to him.
This is really starting to hurt!
Next time I'll steal a limo!
Jake's gameplay is perhaps the most unique out of all the characters, given how its melee system is expanded into a full-on combat system. Jake's melee allows him to close the gaps between enemies, which, I'm not gonna lie, is something that really helps out with the annoying cover shooting mechanics, one of the few black spots on the game. Jake's guns are still pretty handy and still have their uses, so melee isn't just the be-all end-all solution. You still have to know when it's best to get up close and personal and when it's best to make some distance. In Chapter 2, things get pretty intense when you gotta stealth your way through these caves, lest you risk getting drilled in by Ustinik over here. until it becomes a total bitch to play when you gotta open these stupid fucking doors that just won't open! Seriously, fuck the QTEs. Eat a dick, frozen doors! But after that garbage, the campaign is just a high note from beginning to end with some pretty insanely epic moments. I mean, what other game are you able to climb up a helicopter and shoot it at point blank range with a magnum? My favorite epic moment in the entire Jake campaign ends up being the final boss having you sell things man to monster with Ustanik. Yep, it's as cool as it's stupid.
Thanks. Missed me.
That's it, Jake! You got it!
It also helps that Jake and Sherry's campaign works the best with co-op in its story, since it focuses on the dynamic of two characters who are both the children of psychopathic monsters who tried to destroy the world God knows how many times, ultimately coming together to bring the pain against Ustanik and end this nightmare pandemic for good. And when they put the final hit in using the power of love, all I could say was just fuck yes, RE6. I'll be honest and admit that Chris's campaign isn't really my cup of tea from the start. Specifically because it's where the title really loses its luster when it begins to thrust you into basically Call of Duty, but with zombies. The problem with this is that the controls for cover shooting are way too awkward for it to be fun. Chris is more or less the powerhouse of guns with more powerful weaponry than Leon's, but less skill with melee compared to Jake. The Chris campaign does have its fair share of high moments though, such as when looking for 3 key cards, multiple would pop up to chomp on Chris's face. Also this. Worth it! The final boss is perhaps my favorite out of the 3 for just how much it changes things up from the gameplay perspective. In Leon's case, his is more puzzle based, while Jake's, while visually impressive and fun to mess around with, is far too easy, with the only way you can die just being hit by a charge attack 3 times. And Sherry players basically don't even get a final boss. Here, Chris and Pierce's final boss completely changes the dynamic of the core mechanics. While playing as Chris, it's pretty much just the same as before, and pretty much the best boss in the game. With Pierce, he's forced to become a BOW and undergoes a transformation, allowing him to shoot lightning, which is a blast to play with and certainly a shock to the system. It gives both players their own spin on the final boss. Chris players getting a classic showdown with the final boss, putting all the skills they learned to the test, with Pierce players getting a completely new take on the core mechanics that's fun to experiment with. With Chris's story, it focuses on him trying to get revenge on the supposedly villainous Ada Wong in order to avenge his team that's been slain by her. In Pierce's case, he never really came off that interesting compared to Jake and Helena, the other newbies brought into the game. Honestly, Pierce could have been replaced by Jill or even Claire, and the story would probably be more effective than with Pierce. His sacrifice is still pretty well done, and the dynamic between Chris and Pierce works pretty well, with the latter trying to get the former to pull his head out of his ass and focus on the big picture. It's pretty much the only game in the RE series where I didn't see Chris as the stereotypical hero, with games before and after giving a pretty bland characterization for the roided up boulder puncher. With all 3 campaigns done, that leaves the final campaign being Ada's, and it's safe to say that this is probably the least interesting of the 4, with stealth sequences that don't really mesh well with this style of gameplay, or an annoying helicopter sequence. Ada is clearly the lesser of the 4 campaigns, even if there are some cool moments in the story, such as the boss fight with Carla, aka Fake Ada. Spoilers. All that being said, that leaves perhaps the best part of RE6, Mercenaries mode. And in nowhere the series does Mercenaries shine the most than RE6, which is perfectly orientated for the more action-styled gameplay compared to the others in the series.
Check and make, buddy.
From here, the game's combat system shines the most, with each character's styles getting even more fun to mess with. My favorite of which being Leon. Add that in with throwing around cheeky taunts, and it's hard to deny that RE6's Mercenaries mode is the best in the series, before and after, with how many ways there are to mess around with and look badass at the same time. Though, I'll be honest and say that I have liked some more extra characters such as Barry, Jill, or Claire, given how fun it would have been to play as them in a game as ridiculous as this. With all this content, including a mode that allows you to play as the monsters, and Ustanik, with a combat system as fun to mess with as this, it's quite easy to say that RE6, despite its faults, certainly does stand out from any other shooter in the market these days. Closing this entire video out, Resident Evil 6 is without doubt the game that RE6 fans will never forget. For better or worse, it's pretty much the game that everyone looks to when they say RE had too much action, and from that perspective, I agree. RE6 is a game that sums up the series for getting its roots and what made it so good in the first place. But when looking back, after the return to horror gameplay, I think we can still take RE6 for what it is on its own merit, since in the grand scheme of it, it's ultimately harmless. Is it stupid? Hell yeah it is. Is it over the top? Hell yeah it is. Is it nowhere close to as scary as the previous game? Hell yeah it is. But maybe that's why this game is as fun as it is. It basically embraces the insanity of RE4 and 5 and dials it up to 11 to the point where it really does stick with you forever, when it's basically throwing the most insane shit you can imagine and expecting you to take it seriously with a straight face. Maybe in many ways I'm just blinded by nostalgia, because of all the games in the series, RE6 is the one that brought me into it, funnily enough. It is the first RE game I've ever seen in my life and the first one I ever played in my life. Maybe there is just something in this game that shows a diamond in the rough. Whatever it is, I think RE fans should at least give this game one more shot. Would I love to see another RE game with a combat system like this with all the issues being fixed? Probably. Would it be interesting to see a sub-series of RE games in this style? Maybe. Even if it is stupid, maybe that's exactly why this game works so well for me. Maybe because for all of its screw-ups and hiccups, it perfectly embodies everything it wants to be and everything RE6 represents. A crazy, stupid action game. Thanks for checking out the video and giving it a look. Really helps my channel these days. And don't worry about the series so far that I'm working on for KH3. And just to give you an update on KH3 another time, another story, so far we're on 50% of the script. So far this is when the real good shit starts, and I'm hoping that one day we can bring this dream to life, and bring to life the true Kingdom Hearts 3 that fans deserve. Next time we'll be covering Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind and Limit Cut, and boy oh boy do we have much to talk about in those games. See you next time.